The Beast of Tuksa, written by Trent Kanuga and Elizabeth Moon. Chapter 6, Fright in the Fog. "Go on, eat up," Olaf urged as he pushed a sandwich at my mouth. "No thanks," I mumbled through my teeth. "You know I never really go for breakfast." He split the sandwich in half and put part of it down on the ground for Bartol, who immediately swallowed it whole. As he slowly lifted the other half to his mouth, he looked down at Amiku, who had been licking his lips since he first saw it. I'm just teasing. This piece is for you." "Well, we've got plenty. At least enough to get us through this place," he said as he pulled off a piece for the small creature. The elf graciously accepted it with both hands and stuffed it into his mouth in one bite. Olaf stepped out of the main doorway of the cabin and looked out at the foggy chasm. It was hard to see anything beyond 20 feet. Above his head there was a clearing where he could make out a few stars in the early morning sky. "Hold up. Something's not right. The forest, I noticed it too. The enormous route that had taken us to the cabin now twisted off in a completely different direction from the way we had come in the previous night. Another larger route had emerged out of the fog to connect to the cabin door. Everything had shifted. In fact, every crooked root and twig that had held the cabin up wrapped around the structure in a completely new way. I had no idea which way we'd come or where we were going. "What happened?" I asked. "Well, I guess now we know what the ruckus was all about last night." Olaf looked around and stared straight at me. I swallowed hard. "Seems like the whole forest up and switched it around on us last night." "Well, that figures, don't it?" Olaf planted a solid pat on my back. At least the rain let up." Olaf always found a way to find the bright side in any situation. "So which way do we go?" I asked, eager to move on from that place. I stepped over to where the two intersecting routes knotted together to form distinct suspended passageways across the chasm. Apparently the cabin was eager to get rid of us too. "Judging from the position of the Onako constellation, I'd say we'd better head that way." Olaf pointed from a row of stars to the bridge to his left. "How do you know?" I shuffled the straps on my pack and narrowed my eyes at him. "Onako's arrow always points west," Olaf said with a bit of a smug grin. "Using the stars to find our way is a basic wilderness survival technique. Remind me to teach you that one." I shrugged casually, but inside I was impressed at his knowledge and wisdom. "I never thought I'd need to know that," I whispered as I lowered myself down the ledge onto the suspended route below. "Guess I always thought there weren't that many places to get lost in the valley." Leading the way, I charged ahead and stepped onto the root bridge. Olaf was right behind me, and Bartol came gingerly after him. Eager to catch up and leave the cabin behind, he jumped down, causing the entire bridge to sway. Olaf lurched and caught himself with his walking stick, while I stabilized my footing. "Gal darn it, Barty!" Olaf waved his arms. "You gotta be more careful." Bartol must have felt our blazing irritation as he drooped his head down to avoid our eyes. "Hey, where's Amiku?" I asked, searching around us. He stood by the entrance, waving us off with his tiny little hands. "Guess he's not too eager to leave his home," Olaf said. "Even after our brief encounter, I'm gonna miss that little fella. I honestly never really got to make a lot of friends, so I was kind of hoping that he'd tag along for our journey." With that, we traveled along the suspended route cautiously, even crawling where the intersecting vineways hung too low. After an hour or so, we'd reached stable ground once more. Olaf stepped down onto the muddy soil, took off his hat, and sighed with relief. Suddenly, his expression shifted to a frown. "Ah, criminy!" Olaf wiped his brow with his forearm and took out his pipe and lit it. "What is it?" I asked as I jumped down beside him. "Curses and barriers." He moaned and gestured ahead. The small mud patch where we stood was enclosed by a 25-foot stone wall, strangled by thick roots. They coiled around and into the stones, bristling with curving thorns. At its center, they converged into a large opening at least 12 feet wide. Beyond the hill, the mist cleared enough for them to see an enormous maze, which trailed on several miles into the distance. "The whole dark forest is nothing but a crazy old wizard's trap. Damn fool probably died centuries ago. Spells left everything sealed up tighter than a gnat's ass stretched over a rain barrel," Olaf grumbled. He took off his backpack and began walking back in the direction where they had come from along the vineway. "Hey, where the heck are you going?" "Stay put," he waved me off. "I gotta take a leak." Barty and I watched him as his figure became a dark shape in the fog, then disappeared completely. When he was entirely out of sight, I turned my attention back to the maze. I thought he knew what the heck he was doing. There must be some way through. Looking up at the stones that formed the doorway, I noticed they were put together in a way that formed a big triangle. It was a familiar shape I'd seen somewhere before. "The book! From the cabin!" I exclaimed. I glanced all around me and made sure I was in the clear. No sign of Olaf. I crouched down with my back to the bridge and pulled out the old wizard's book from my satchel. Flipping it open to a random page, the text was different. Now it read, "A living thing." Thumbing through the rest of the book, each page held the same cryptic message. "A living thing?" I said aloud this time. "The heck does that even mean? What kind of a book has got one page over and over?" I pressed my index finger to my lip and closed my eyes. This was my thinking pose. It usually worked pretty well in a pinch. Was it some kind of a riddle? A password? There must be something more to it, I thought. I traced the outline of the triangular symbol on the page with my finger, and my eyes widened as the ink on the page began to glow with the strange blue light I'd seen when it was back in the cabin. The book felt like it was vibrating in my hands. It crackled with energy. Something tugged invisibly on the small hairs on my hand as I rested it on the page, pulling them toward the symbol as if by gravity. It was as though it was calling out for something living. I yanked my hand away quickly and slammed the book shut, freaking out. It can't be. A chill rushed down my spine to the tips of my fingers. That's just morbid. But then I had a thought. If the book wanted a living thing, maybe I could give it something small, like a worm or something. I mean, what was it going to do? It's just a book. I placed the book on the ground and started digging around in the loose dirt and leaves and mud. It only took a few inches before I caught the end of a worm. I pulled it up out of the earth and gave it a few final words. "Sorry, little fella, but we need you for a test." I reopened the book and dangled the worm over its pages. The symbol began to glow again as the book seemed to open up wider. With each inch that I had brought the worm closer to it, the worm wiggled and curled and had barely touched the surface when it suddenly, ploop, it was gone. The book groaned and whispered in a strange, disturbing sound, and I recognized the language as the one I'd heard back at the cabin. Suddenly, the glowing text flared with fresh, powerful vigor, too bright to look at. When it faded, I looked at the page again. The words and symbols were gone. The page itself, however, now revealed a map. It was a map of the maze right in front of us. I lit up with excitement. Just then Olaf yelled, "We'd better get going," and stomped out of the fog. I hurriedly thrust the book back into my satchel, stood up and turned to face him. He eyed me suspiciously. "Hey, what's going on, guys?" "Oh, I just stretching, getting ready for a trek. Come on, Barty, let's go." Olaf inspected the ground around us, but found nothing in particular, so he shrugged and followed us through the large triangular opening. "You seem pretty confident. Got a feeling there, Mao?" I hopped over a rock and pointed to the sky, pronouncing, "Anako's arrow."